For most of American history, silver wasn't just a shiny metal people collected. It was real money, used in everyday life, trusted, and carried in people's pockets. But behind the scenes, silver has a complicated past in the United States, filled with sudden changes, government decisions, and moments where the metal that once defined the economy was quietly pushed aside. Very few people know this story. Even fewer realize that it didn't happen just once, but 3 separate times. Our story begins in the late 1800s. The United States relied on both gold and silver as the foundation of its currency. This system, known as bimetallism, worked for many years. But then something unexpected happened. Silver production began to rise around the world. New discoveries and better mining techniques increased the supply. As more silver entered the market, its value began to fall. This created an unusual situation. People could buy silver at a low price and use it to pay debts at a higher legal rate, because the law still treated silver as equal to gold. That imbalance caused financial instability, and the government had to make a difficult choice. In 1873, Congress passed a law that quietly removed the standard silver dollar from the official list of coins the U.S. Mint was allowed to produce. This decision later became known as the demonetization of silver. At the time, most Americans didn't even notice. There were no newspaper headlines, no big announcements. But the impact was huge. Without creating new silver dollars, the government had effectively changed the monetary system. Silver slowly faded as everyday money, and the nation leaned more heavily toward gold. Although this wasn't a physical confiscation, it was the first major step in pulling silver away from the public and placing control of the metal firmly in the hands of policymakers. Decades passed. The country grew, banks expanded, and the economy evolved. But then came the Great Depression, one of the darkest economic periods in American history. Banks were collapsing, businesses were failing, and people were desperate for safety. Many turned to precious metals as a store of value. In 1933, the government restricted private ownership of gold, a moment that is well known. What people often forget is what happened immediately afterward with silver. In 1934, the Silver Purchase Act gave the U.S. government new authority over the metal. It allowed the Treasury to acquire large amounts of silver from banks, businesses, and industries that held it in significant quantities. The goal wasn't to target individuals. The government didn't knock on citizens' doors asking for their silverware or jewelry. But this law gave the government the power to take control of commercial silver holdings and nationalize a large portion of the country's silver production. Overnight, the Treasury became one of the world's largest buyers and holders of silver. Mines were required to sell their output to the government, and companies that relied on silver had to adjust to a new system, where the metal was under strict federal control. This was the second moment the government asserted direct influence over America's silver supply, and it shaped the nation's financial landscape for decades. Time moved on, the country recovered, and the world entered a new era of technology and economic growth. By the 1960s, a new problem began to appear, one the government hadn't expected. The value of the silver inside U.S. coins started rising. Soon, the silver content of dimes, quarters, and half dollars was worth more than the coins themselves. People began hoarding them, melting them, and withdrawing them from circulation. This created shortages in the banking system, and everyday transactions became more difficult. Something had to change. In 1965, the government acted again. A new law eliminated silver from the dime and quarter and reduced the silver and half dollars. Over the next few years, banks pulled silver coins out of circulation as quickly as possible. The government melted large quantities of them, and slowly the last traces of silver-based currency disappeared. By 1968, even silver certificates, which once could be exchanged for actual silver, were no longer redeemable. This was the final turning point. Silver was removed from America's everyday money, ending a chapter that had lasted nearly 200 years. Looking at these 3 moments together, 1873, 1934, and the late 1960s, a clear picture emerges. Each time the government stepped in, the economy was under pressure. In the 1800s, it was instability between gold and silver. In the 1930s, it was the chaos of the Great Depression. In the 1960s, it was a shortage caused by rising silver prices and widespread hoarding. None of these actions was aimed at taking personal belongings from ordinary citizens. Instead, They were attempts to manage a financial system that kept shifting with global markets, economic crises, and the changing role of precious metals. Still, these decisions had a powerful impact on the country. They shaped the value of money, influenced the direction of the economy, and changed how Americans interacted with silver from something they used daily to something that became scarce, to something that eventually belonged mostly to collectors, investors, and industries instead of the general public. Today, silver has a very different place in society. It's used in electronics, solar panels, medical devices, and investments, but not as circulating money. Most people never think about why their coins no longer contain silver, or how the government once played such a direct role in controlling the metal. But understanding this history helps explain why the modern financial system works the way it does, and how the decisions of the past shaped the value of money today. The story of silver in America is not just about economics. It's a story of change, slow at times, sudden at others, and how a metal once considered the backbone of the nation. As currency was transformed by 3 major government actions. Each moment left a mark. And together, they tell a story that remains one of the most fascinating chapters in America's monetary history. If you enjoyed this deep dive and want more hidden stories behind money, history, and the financial world, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. There are many more surprising chapters to uncover, and this journey is just beginning. Thanks for watching.